We think emotional language protects our relationships, but the truth is harder to look at. Sometimes we use therapy words to protect ourselves from our relationships. Not consciously, it's rarely malicious. It starts in a moment most people won't admit. Not the moment we feel hurt, but the moment we feel exposed. Welcome back to We Need to Talk, where we lean into the things most people avoid. I'm Dr. Darcy Sterling. There's a truth we rarely say out loud. Most of us aren't afraid of conflict. We're afraid of what conflict might reveal in us. Because if someone names a hurt and we caused it, we risk losing the identity we worked hard to build, the evolved one, the self-aware one, the person who does the work. When that identity feels threatened, therapy language becomes a shield, not intentionally, but functionally. It protects who we believe we are instead of protecting the connection. We use language that sounds sophisticated, but this is not emotional intelligence. It's identity protection masquerading as healing. Here's the dangerous part. The more sophisticated your language becomes, the less obvious your avoidance becomes to your partner and to yourself. Because avoidance wrapped in moral high ground doesn't look like avoidance. It looks principled, boundaried, regulated, until later, when the connection quietly collapses. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me stay inside you for one more beat. When you reach for a therapy word, boundary, safe, triggered, protecting my peace, you're not just trying to exit the conversation. You're trying to exit accountability with your identity intact. That is the seduction. Avoidance feels virtuous, not cowardly. And once avoidance feels righteous, the relationship starts losing oxygen because it happens slowly enough to feel like nothing's happening at all. Here's how the cycle begins. It always starts small. Someone brings you a frustration, a disappointment, a request for accountability, nothing dramatic, but your nervous system registers it as danger, not because the moment is unsafe, but because accountability feels unsafe. So you reach for emotional language to control the frame. A subtle shift happens. The conversation goes from what happened between us to how you made me feel by bringing this up. That move flips the power instantly. Your partner begins in vulnerability, but the moment you invoke emotional safety, they are forced into defense. Suddenly, the problem's not your behavior, it is their delivery, their timing, their tone, their dysregulation. The original rupture disappears. This move repeats because it rewards you. The payoff is threefold. You avoid shame. You avoid repair work. You avoid uncertainty. Meanwhile, your partner pays the cost. Silence, self-doubt, and emotional exile. Here's the part most people miss. Your partner learns, over time, that bringing you hard truths is expensive. So they stop. And avoidance becomes the organizing principle of the relationship. Not because either one of you chose distance, but because you chose comfort over contact. That's the move underneath. Not the words themselves, but the function those words serve. Here's where the pattern deepens. Not in a blow-up, in the quiet. The next time something hurts, your partner hesitates just a beat. That hesitation is the first sign of distance. They rehearse in their head. They choose their words carefully. They ask themselves whether bringing it up is worth the fallout, not the fight, the feeling of being framed as the problem. So they stay quiet, or they soften the truth, or they share half the thing and they keep the rest for later. That is how intimacy erodes, not through betrayal, but through the tiny moments where truth gets swallowed to preserve calm. And here's the part people rarely notice. Silence feels good at first. It feels like maturity. It feels like progress. It feels like we're finally learning how to avoid unnecessary conflict. But silence isn't peace. Silence is what fills the space where repair should have been. And once silence settles between two people, it doesn't leave easily. The next hurt arrives. There's even more hesitation. Maybe you both decide the timing isn't right. You're tired. You'll talk tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes for conversations that cost intimacy. And little by little, the distance becomes structural. You stop asking questions you don't want the answers to. You stop sharing feelings you can't explain elegantly. You stop expecting repair because you stop believing repair is even possible. This is how relationships end. Not when someone walks out the door, but when truth stops entering the room. We've been talking about language, but this isn't really about vocabulary. It's about identity. Because once silence becomes a strategy, you don't just avoid conflict, you avoid being known. And here's what almost no one admits to themselves. If you only want connection on your terms, regulated, contained, predictable, you don't want intimacy, you want control. And that's the paradox. You'll protect the relationship from discomfort until there is no relationship left to protect. This is the moment people usually ask, so what do I do differently? But notice that impulse. It's another exit strategy disguised as growth. Give me the solution, Darcy, so I don't have to sit in what you're naming right now. Stay here instead. Consider this one question. When did peace become the goal instead of repair? Because peace without truth isn't peace. It's distance disguised as calm. And the relationships that survive long term are not the ones with no friction. They're the ones where friction is allowed because both people stay. Staying doesn't mean staying calm. It means staying present. It means you don't shut down. You don't disappear behind language. You don't end the conversation to protect your comfort. You stay in discomfort long enough for the truth to surface. Not peacefully, not gracefully, but honestly. I want you to sit with the possibility that your pursuit of calm might actually be your fear of accountability. And the relationship you think you're protecting might be the relationship you are slowly walking out of in the name of safety. Not because you're cruel, but because you're scared. If you want access to my thinking off mic, there's a listener subscription with one short, unedited audio from me each month. The link is in the show notes. So let's be clear about what staying actually looks like, because right now it's abstract and avoidance hides in the abstract. Staying is not you delivering a flawless, regulated TED Talk about your childhood. Staying is you not leaving the interaction when your body is screaming at you to get the fuck out. It starts earlier than you think. It starts in that microsecond when your body shifts. Maybe everything speeds up, or suddenly goes quiet, or you feel yourself pulling back inside. That's the moment you normally reach for language. I need to protect my peace. This doesn't feel safe. I don't have the bandwidth for this. Staying means you do something different in that exact beat. You still feel that urge inside you. You just don't turn that urge into behavior. In real time, it's not that elegant. You just describe what's happening inside of you. You say, I really want to shut this down right now, or I can feel myself getting defensive, or everything inside of me wants to walk away. Notice the difference. You're not pretending to be above it all. You're naming what's actually happening. That's the first layer of staying. You stay honest about your own impulse. The second layer is brutal, and this is where most people tap out. You let your partner keep talking, even while every cell in your body is arguing in your head. You already know how to do this. You debate internally all the time. I'm asking you to use that same muscle in a different direction. You usually listen just long enough to find the flaw, the tone issue, the word you can latch onto and use as your exit. You don't hear the hurt. You hear the opening for your defense. Staying means you don't reach for that opening. You let it pass. You let the sentence land. You let the impact in long enough to feel it. You will not like this. You will feel exposed. You will feel mischaracterized. You will want to clarify, correct, clean it up. Staying is not you agreeing with every word. Staying is you staying in the room long enough to understand what your partner is actually trying to show you about their experience. And here's the part almost no one wants to admit. The first few times you do this, you will not feel proud of yourself. You will feel clumsy. You will say too much or not enough. You will walk away replaying the entire conversation in your head, convinced you handled it badly. That's fine. Staying is a capacity you build, not a talent you either have or don't have. Now let's talk about what this looks like from your partner's side, because this is where the stakes live. If they're used to you shutting things down with emotional language, the first time you stay, they won't trust it. They'll wait for the "I'm done" line. They'll be tentative, guarded, testing the edges to see if it's actually safe to say the thing. You'll be tempted to punish them for that. You'll want to say, "See, you didn't even believe I'm trying." That's the old pattern trying to get back in. Staying here means you remember the history you created. You taught them that bringing you the truth was expensive. It's going to take more than one good conversation to undo that learning. This is the unglamorous reality of change. You don't get immediate credit. You don't get a gold star the first time you stay. You get slowly rebuilt trust if you can tolerate not being seen as the evolved one while you earn it. And that's the real cost of growth for you. You have to give up the fantasy that you're the enlightened partner and accept that in this area, you've been the one leaving the conversation without ever leaving the room. You don't have to drown in shame about that, but you do have to look at it because the alternative is simple. You keep winning the moral argument and losing the relationship. That's the choice on the table. Not peace versus drama, not safety versus chaos. It's this. Do you want to protect the image of yourself, or do you want to protect the relationship? You can't have both, not in these moments. One of them has to give. And if you keep choosing your image, you already know where that road goes. You've been in it. That's why staying matters, not because it's noble, but because it's the only way a relationship gets a chance to exist in reality instead of in your performance of being healthy. Once you see that protecting your peace isn't a virtue, it starts looking like what it actually is in these moments. One very elegant way of leaving. The cure begins when you start staying plugged into what your partner is saying instead of planning your response. Because once you stop protecting your position, you can finally hear the impact. Not the accusation, the impact. And in that moment, something shifts. The conversation stops being a threat to your identity and becomes a chance to stay connected. That's what intimacy actually is. Not calm, not perfect regulation. The willingness to stay when your instinct is to leave. If you want to understand where avoidance takes your relationship, don't look at your last argument. Look at 3 years from now. Because this pattern doesn't explode, it erodes. It doesn't end relationships dramatically, it empties them quietly. Nobody files for divorce because someone said, I don't have the bandwidth for this one time. But play that out over dozens of conflicts, and here's what happens. Conversations shrink. Truth becomes selective. Repair becomes rare. Assumptions replace curiosity. Distance becomes the default setting. The relationship doesn't break, it hollows out. And by the time you notice, the emotional structure is already gone. Here's the future you don't want to see, but you need to. If every difficult moment becomes a moment you exit, eventually there will be nothing left to exit from. People imagine relationships dying in this dramatic final conversation. That is not how it works. They die through 1,000 moments where someone chooses peace over contact, comfort over truth, moral safety over intimacy. And here's the harder truth. Avoidance doesn't stay contained in one relationship. It becomes a lifestyle, a worldview, a nervous system default. You start managing colleagues this way, friends, family, children. Any moment that threatens your self-image becomes a moment you control with emotional language instead of staying in the mess. Eventually, you don't know what real connection feels like because you've replaced it with performance. Curated, regulated, self-protective contact that never risks being seen. Here's the twist. If every relationship ends when accountability enters, you will always believe people are unsafe. Not because they are, but because accountability threatens your image of yourself. That's the long-term cost. You don't lose the relationship first. You lose access to who you could be inside the relationship. There's another consequence no one talks about. Avoidance produces loneliness long before it produces a breakup. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of emotional contact. You can be married, partnered, surrounded, and still lonely if every conversation stops at the boundary of your comfort. If you exit every moment where your identity feels exposed, the intimacy never crosses the threshold where two people become real to each other. That's the actual future you're choosing every time you end a hard conversation in the name of safety and you don't return to it. You're choosing a relationship where your nervous system stays comfortable and your connection stays shallow. And one day, you'll wake up and think, we never fight, so why do I feel so alone? This is why. Peace without truth is the off-ramp to loneliness. That's the future avoidance builds. Not chaos, not trauma, not volatility, emptiness. So when you reach for the emotional vocabulary exit, don't ask, how do I protect my peace right now? Ask a different question. What future am I building with this move? Because every exit lays another brick between you and the person you love. And walls don't start big. They rise quietly, layer by layer, while you're trying to convince yourself you're protecting the relationship. Avoidance builds slowly. Connection dies slowly. Loneliness arrives suddenly. That's the long view. That is what's at stake. We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. Editing and sound engineering is by Bart Migal. Our theme music is by Trending Music. Special thanks to Amanda Christiani and Robin Gentian. If you want me to keep making episodes like this for you, make sure you follow the show wherever you're listening or watching, and share this episode with someone who needs it. We'll be back on Tuesday with more relationship, dating, and mental health tools you can actually use. References are always linked in the show notes. I'll see you soon.